Welcome to Animation Dingle. I'm delighted to have Tomm and Ross here with me at the festival. I'd like to say thank you to Screen Ireland for supporting us. We're here in the most westerly point of Europe. We're looking out over to the Blascade Moor, and we're on Corcaguina, and specifically we're in Dick Mack's pub. And I'm here in Dick Mack's pub virtually because the original invitation for Tomm and Ross was actually to meet in Dick Mack's pub. We would have had a conversation over a pint with a small audience, and we would have projected Wolfwalkers on the gable outside afterwards. So that was the original plan. So there you go. So here we are. Welcome to Dingle, guys.
Like everything during this pandemic, it does feel like there's a parallel universe where there's other versions of us having way more crack and a few pints, and it just always it doesn't feel like it's not happening. It feels like it is happening, but somewhere else in our imagination somehow. So I look forward to being back in Dingle. It's definitely one of my favorites of the calendar of festivals. It's one of the best festivals.
Maybe there's also a parallel universe where you know, Wolfwalkers bombed and Ireland is underwater and we're in prison. So, you know, we could be balanced. We could be in the middle. You know, of
I don't want to be in prison underwater.
That sounds a bit difficult. I'll tell you, first of all, we'll start with the Dingle connections because you know, Dingle is used to filmmaking. You know, obviously Ryan's Daughter. Ron Howard brought Home and Away. We had Last Jedi here last, but of course Song of the Sea. I remember, Tomm, specifically you telling me about building sandcastles with your son. He was about 10 on Vintry Beach when you were conceiving Song of the Sea.
Yeah.
And also Paul telling me about sound recordings being taken out of Dingle Bay. So maybe just tell the audience a bit about that.
Song of the Sea is very linked to Dingle because we were in production of Secret of Kells when my wife and I got married, and our son was already 10, so he was a great ring bearer. And we had to, for whatever reason, I don't know what the rules were, I don't think it's like that anymore, we had to spend 10 days in Dingle to kind of qualify to get married there, you know. And so we had a lovely 10 days in Dingle. And that's where the inspiration for both Song of the Sea and Puffin Rock came from. Trip out to the Skelligs, and we went past, and my son was really into nature and all back then. And he loved the idea that there was an island just for puffins and guillemots and things that humans couldn't go on. And it sparked the whole idea of Puffin Rock as well. So yeah, we have a great connection to Dingle, you know. And I think it's always lovely to go down there as well, because it is such a special festival in that people come from all over and you have the best of the best. And you know, we had Roy Nesbitt one time, was one of my favorite memories there. Like he was a hero of mine since college. He was kind of the unsung you know, brains behind Dick Williams and all Dick Williams' great stuff like Roger Rabbit and the Pink Panther, and particularly The Thief and the Cobbler, which inspired Ross and I so much in college. And to sit in the pub there in Dingle with him surrounded by, you know, admiring fans, having a pint, talking to one of, you know, my longtime animation heroes, very special memory. So I hope we can get back to Dingle soon.
I remember that really well with Roy. You interviewed him over in the church in St. James's, and I remember you continuing across the road in the hotel, Binner's Hotel, because I remember I walked through a couple of times and they still wore around the fireplace with all these students. It was really lovely. And I remember him telling the story about falling down the stairs when he was drunk, and that's how he saw that.
That's how we could imagine the stairs going round and round.
Spiral
but
stairs,
the fact that he was able to draw it then, like the stuff that he did was insane, because pre-computers, and we can talk a bit about the stuff we've done that is a little bit Roy Nesbitt, Dick Williams style in Wolfwalkers, but they did it without computers. They drew everything by hand and animated backgrounds and all. So it was amazing. Yeah, thanks for making that happen. And like hopefully more things like that will happen in the future. But it's great that we're able to do this virtual thing.
No, it's good. Like I remember, like with Roy, it was surprising at the time. I remember I had to write him a letter each time. You know, I'd have a phone call and then I'd write him a letter, and I loved it. It went on for months. It was really cool. I just want to remind audiences as well, at the festival, we're also showing Late Afternoon, Louise's film, and we're showing Cooling Dúlach, Nora's film. So people
Ross and I worked on that too, actually.
Cooling Dúlach.
Yeah. We were like I mean, the studio was so small then we could give ourselves great titles, like we were co-art directors, but that basically meant I designed all the characters and Ross drew all the backgrounds, basically. But
I love that film. I don't know if you won't remember, but I think it was like 2006 or something. I was at the Kerry Film Festival, that festival, and that won the Best Animation Award that year at the festival.
Oh, brilliant.
Selected by Mandy Keane, who used to head up Soho House Cinema Worldwide.
Wow.
She's actually a judge again this year.
Wow.
So she's always proud of that choice.
Early successes, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Wolfwalkers is also, by the way, it's up for Audience Choice Award. We should remind people of that. They have to vote, click their 5-star rating, and
Better vote for us.
There's stiff competition. I don't know, Ross, have you seen Calamity, Joseph?
Yeah.
Class.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I mean, Remy worked with us on Secret of Kells, so we've always kind of had like a close friendship with him since, and it's just beautiful to see that he's still doing like he's making films the same kind of the same timeline to us as well.
Yeah. He made his first film, Long Way North, and it was released around the same time as Song of the Sea. And on the other side, as much as we're friends, we were often competing for crew. I remember when we were crewing up for hand-drawn animators on Wolfwalkers, there was Calamity in production in Paris and then Klaus in Spain.
So remember when we pitched Wolfwalkers, that cartoon movie, Remy pitched Calamity, I think just before us, and we were blown away by the backgrounds, just and the art style at that time. And I remember us saying, "Oh God, he's going to nab all the really great French animators and background painters now."
Well, we won't talk about Calamity, but I will say, I mean, the backgrounds are immense in that film.
Oh yeah,
so it's so cinematic. The
that
color
guy,
palette is so sophisticated.
Now he has a talented team, but Remy himself is one of the best draftsmen I've ever met. Like he was assistant director on Secret of Kells, but he would fill his sketchbook with what would be frameable landscapes. He would drive around the country and just paint Ireland in his little moleskin sketchbook. Very unassuming guy too. Very, very skilled draftsman and great sense of cinema. And a little bit of that genius got into Secret of Kells, thankfully, and I hope I learned something like that from him.
He avoided photography, so he used to draw instead of taking a picture of any landscape. He used to draw it because he said that like it forces you to really investigate what's in front of you. And he hated photography so much that of all the time that he spent on Secret of Kells, I think I only have one photo of Remy, and he's got a cardboard box over his head.
You see, he's had to face publicity since then. He was kind of behind the scenes. He used to work in comic books as well, so really great draftsman. Oh, nice background.
I've changed my backgrounds because we're going to talk about Wolfwalkers.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. No, I'm just saying I have fond memories as well of taking Remy and some of the rest of the crew on Secret of Kells days out to Dingle as well. We visited Dingle. We went up to the Aran Islands. We did a kind of a trip because, Ross and I had been developing Secret of Kells with the other Irish team, Nora and everybody here. But then whenever the French co-production came in and we had all these people from France, and we wanted to introduce them to Ireland, we took them on a trip because the West is always the best place to show off the country,
Yeah, I agree. There's no question all along that coast. So we're going to begin with the story, and we'll have to give a nod to Will Collins, the Kerry man. You can talk about him if you want.
Oh, he's a Cork man.
Is he?
I think he's from Cork. He's a West Cork man as far as I know. Sorry, the kingdom. Sorry, kingdom of Kerry. I don't think you can have Will Collins. I think
he would die Tralee. That's okay. I've got to, that's all I've got.
He did study in Tralee. That's true.
Yeah. But I love the setting and even the synopsis within the storyline. You can tell us where it all came from. Like, it's set in Ireland, 1600s. You talk about magic and superstition and this tribe that can turn into wolves, and a journey by a daughter with her father to wipe those wolves out, the last pack of wolves in Ireland. It's really magical, the whole setup. So if you don't mind, just tell us where it all came from. Where did the story actually originate, and how did you conceive it?
The stories are from around here in Kilkenny, the Wolves of Ossory. We have some manuscripts here showing some of those stories. And Ross and I had come up with the idea that we wanted to make a third part to the kind of Irish folklore triptych. I mean, I had the idea for Song of the Sea while working Or Secret of Kells, as we said, and we had the idea for Wolfwalkers while making Song of the Sea. Ross and I were also working on a piece for the Salma Hayek produced film, The Prophet. And that was our first kind of, even though we've known each other since we were, kids, 11 or 12, we hadn't actually co-directed before professionally. And that was a nice experience, broadly speaking, in that Ross did all the work and I took all the credit. No, I'm only joking. And so we decided to co-direct again. And we had the idea like 7 years ago that we would tell this story that was based in Kilkenny, based on this folklore in Kilkenny about people that can become wolves that were cursed by St. Patrick, and because they wouldn't convert for him. And those stories, apparently, they've died out so much, like they're hardly known at all. But I remember when we read up on them, it was fascinating that even in Salem during the witch trials and stuff in that period, if you were from Kilkenny, you were immediately under suspicion of being a wolf or a werewolf or something. But the actual stories themselves are kind of interesting. They're not so much monster stories as kind of wonder tales of like almost more like a Selkie kind of story where, a wolf would be able to lead someone who was lost in the forest home, or sometimes the wolves could talk. And, there was just, and the most interesting thing we thought was that it wasn't a physical transformation. It was like an astral projection of an actual wolf. Like your body was asleep back at home and an actual wolf was out there in the woods living as a wolf, and anything that happened to it in the forest happened to you back at home if you were a wolf walker. So we thought it was an interesting take on it all.
I think it sparked our imagination more because, like, in the very, very initial lunchtime where we came up with the kind of bones of the story, we were concentrating on like much more of an empathy posit, like what would it take for a hunter to empathize with the prey that he's hunting, and so like we started then investigating like polarization of society, that like, people against people, like the English against the Irish, or the way the fear of immigrants or fear of like people of another religion turn people against people, and what would it take for that empathy to generate a friendship. And when Tomm mentioned the wolf people of Ossory when we were developing that idea, what was so great about it is that, like Tomm said, it wasn't that the wolf was a monster, it was just a normal wolf. And it opened up this kind of this dialogue about how an ancient, like a more ancient civilization in Ireland didn't immediately view wolves as being monsters. And the more we did research into that, the more we discovered that they had much more of a kind of symbiotic relationship with wolves, that wolves weren't immediately a species that needed to be wiped out. Like there were stories of Irish people leaving out offerings for wolves, so with the hope that the wolves would leave them alone then, or that they would give one of their livestock as a kind of an offering to the wolves with the hope then that the wolves wouldn't attack the rest of the livestock. So it wasn't this monster, it was this thing that you could maybe make a deal with, and there was like a level of respect. And I think that comes across even in the term for a wolf, the Irish word for wolf, Mochtira, son of the land, that it kind of immediately has an imbued respect in there.
Yeah, I think as well that Ross and I were interested in talking about the fact that speciesism really can be really dangerous, because once you kind of give a species negative human attributes, the next step is to call another human group that species. So there was a time in the 19th century when you'd see Punch magazine cartoons of Irish people looking like monkeys or like apes, as if that was an insult. And the next thing that we realized was going back before that was Ireland was known as Wolfland, and that was associated with barbarism and savagery and all these things that the colonizing spirit that we kind of tried to put into the Lord Protector character, who's based on Oliver Cromwell. That was exactly the sort of stuff that we wanted to speak to as being dangerous today. It's not just bad for the animals, speciesism, or imbuing these human characteristics on an animal, it's also bad for humans. And the other thing that's quite sad is that when the folklore died out that was connected with wolves and connected Irish people, we lost a little bit of our own identity. Not unlike the Selkie stories, I feel like there's something in the way that we used to have this much closer attachment to the landscape that we're surrounded by, that you lose when you lose the folklore. So it felt like something we wanted to explore,
Yeah, that's fascinating. I did think of the Selkie story myself when I watched Wolfwalkers. It certainly came into my mind. And another thing within the story, like I love rock art and Irish symbolism and all that. And I go walking near here, a place called Lochadoon. It's a very, very old valley, and it actually has rock art and that kind of thing. And I remember when I first saw, to just mention Song of the Sea, it was at a London premiere. You might remember that, Tom, like quite a number of years ago. I remember feeling when I was in the audience, I was watching something of very significant Irish importance. I felt there was something being said and documented and almost archived in a way through animation that I'd never seen about our Irish culture and our history. And I felt this is going to always be here. And I felt the same with Wolfwalkers. And it went a little deeper for me because of the symbolism and the way it's used as a language within the film. I almost see it like a bookended idea that there's Ogham writing and Irish symbolism on one end. And right now today, there's you guys making an Irish animated feature film within that territory of language. And, you know, I don't know if that sounds a bit silly to you or not.
No, it doesn't sound silly, but it sounds like something that's kind of hard to sorry, I'm just flicking randomly through slides here to keep people have something nice to look at, pictures wise. But no, I think you're right in a way. There's a continuity, and there's also the thing of storytelling as well in Ireland being a continuous tradition. And I think the visual side of it for this, we kind of opened up a bit. We kind of went more towards like woodblock prints and all that for the show in the town, and where the kind of the colonized part of the country. We're looking at maps and etchings from the period. And then in the forest, we were able to, not just in decorations that we put on the objects, but also in the whole composition. Like it's kind of a joke in the studio at this stage that I'm constantly putting those cup and ring markings into compositions. It's just become a kind of visual habit of mine to use, and spirals, and a lot of the visual language that we evolved back in Secret of Kells and Song of the Sea has kind of continued and evolved into. Do you want to speak to that, Ross, a little bit?
Yeah, I suppose in Secret of Kells, like we were definitely drawing from the Celtic Christian art, you know, of Book of Kells, and like all of those shapes were used for compositions, for like designs of objects, characters, everything like that. With Wolfwalkers being a later story, you know, later in history, and also later in our careers, I suppose, we didn't necessarily draw from any specific visual motifs like shape language for compositions and stuff. The thing that Tom was mentioning with the circle in the middle and the kind of symmetry, I think that might be a hangover from Secret of Kells days, but where we did definitely draw from like from rock art, as you were mentioning, the kind of older designs on, say, Newgrange and Olmstones would be inside in the Wolfwalkers cave, because we wanted to suggest that was a really, really ancient place. And so I suppose that would be where we would see definite like Irish markings, and then like our own modern interpretation of like those markings as if they were drawn by or carved by a culture that had this relationship with wolves. But then because it's set in 1650, the closer you get towards the town, the more rigid and pattern and geometric like it is, and the more kind of contemporary to that age it is. So I suppose Secret of Kells has very much an Irish identity, whereas this is a little bit like maybe broader or non-specific.
I think as well that what we wanted to show with the Wolfwalkers is that thing that I love, and we've kind of snuck it into all our films, is that syncretism, I think it's called, where the pagan beliefs were still there side by side with the like Christian beliefs or modern point of view. And when you look in the cave, you know, you have markings that like are pre-Celtic, you know, like the really megalithic markings, and then layered on top of that, you've got more modern stuff. And you kind of see that in like holy wells, and you know, you see that in certain places around the country where there's like an old Sheila and a gig side by side with like a Holy Mother statue or something, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. Even the village I grew up in, you know, we have a patron day, like the patron day. That's Mary now, but before then, of course, it would have been a pagan well, you know, where people get.
That's it, and that's what I think is so interesting, that what was, you know, really being stamped out with the time of Cromwell was with the Puritan worldview, was that kind of layered faith that was still rooted in nature and a certain kind of pagan animism, with just a kind of veneer of Christianity over it, where you have, you know, Bridget based on Brigid, and you have all these different saints that were just kind of replacing an older belief system, you know. So it's interesting, yeah.
And here it is, Tom, you mentioned it there, and I was going to bring it up, the whole printing influence that's obviously got on, the block printing, lino printing, etching, and you even mentioned map making. That's all very evident, I think, within the film, and even within the motif and the font of Wolfwalkers itself, or text used in the film. It's like it's carved. You know, the designs coming off the fonts are literally like wooden carved. So yeah, tell us a bit about the decisions to make those choices, or where it came from.
I think it was kind of maybe obvious from the start. As soon as we decided to set it in this time of 1650 with the Cromwellian invasion, that we would draw from the artwork that was around at that time. And there was something in the woodcut printing of that time, there was something very kind of brutalist and crude and naive and very kind of aggressive, almost mark making, because they had to use like such basic tools and carve out of wood. You did get these like aggressive big black shapes and like cut marks into it. So it became very obvious that we could use that as a visual language for this cage-like oppressive town that Robin lives in, where the Lord Protector has these very strict rules for everyone in the town, but especially for girls or women in the town. And the more we looked into the research of the woodcuts at the time, the more kind of ideas it gave us, and like, you know, there was some crazy woodcuts. Maybe if anyone saw the little image that Tom showed at the start of this presentation, there was you know, woodcuts of they were almost used as propaganda of like Irish people committing like, you know, horrendous acts and like acts of revenge, you know, like, and then yeah, you can see it there, and then there's like crazy little things of that guy lying on his back with one huge foot, you know, like, so it just showed like this was a time when they were into witchcraft, and like every second person was being condemned as a witch, and they believed in all these demonic possessions and familiars and all this kind of stuff. So we really wanted to kind of delve into that kind of like dark kind of superstitious elements, mixed in with this very, very oppressive, rigid regime of rules for all of the Lord Protector's kind of city.
But keeping it family friendly all the time, it seems to be as well, which was a great
Well, we
balance.
did struggle with that. There was one or two scripts where we started veering into witchcraft, and Robin was being threatened with being burnt as a witch if she stepped out of line, and it just it might have
been historically accurate, but it's too much. Like, you're still telling a contemporary story for a contemporary audience, and all of this research, as fascinating as it is, has to serve, you know, a story that you hope would resonate with modern audiences as well. So it's always a balancing act. What do you leave behind?
Yeah, and it shows, like, I mean, we're not historically accurate at all, but one of the reasons why we had to step back from the history is that it was really, really brutal time. I mean, like, any bit of research we did, we're like, okay, well, that's obviously not going to make it into the film. Like the punishments that they did, like poor Sean Oak is in the stocks for most of the film, but in reality he would have had much, much worse. So yeah, we had to scale back all the time, and we had to like play around with the history, because it just would have been immediately 18s, you know.
Like this concept art is from early on, Maurice, when Robin was going to be a little boy, and we hit upon the idea that the big contrast was this matriarchy versus this patriarchy in terms of themes. It made much more sense for Robin to be a little girl. And then we really delved into how it would have been to be a young woman in this society, and compared to the old Irish way of much more equality, this new Puritan worldview was so brutal. Like, we saw stuff like a scold's bridle. Like, if a woman spoke too much, she could be made to wear like a thing that would, you know, cut her mouth if she talked, and all kinds of awful things. So we were speaking to as gently as possible an oppression that thankfully is becoming faded, but you know, there's still so many issues for women today, and for a young woman trying to stand up against society and be different than what society expects of her is still kind of relevant. But thankfully we've moved on from some of the we've moved on from some of the darker stuff, I hope. Hopefully.
Yeah, no, great balance. I mean, just while we're on the artwork, the other thing, and people asked me to ask you about it, there seems to be a lot of interest in the movement that you created, particularly how the wolf pack move in unison, and that lovely movement. It's even there at the beginning. I remember with the squirrel, the way the squirrel moves away from the tree. There's a beautiful flow with the animals, and then we'll say the soldiers seem to be very regimented, mechanical. And the other movement I loved, particularly, I just thought it really just screamed off the screen, is actually down the right. The fire, when things went on fire, again, it was seemed to be like etched in there, a bit more lino printing or something.
Yeah,
with big angular shapes behind us.
Well, visual language went right the way through. So if it was a fire started by people from the town, it was all like a lino print fire that was replacing a watercolor. If we had had a fire started by the Wolfwalkers, it would have been curvy and stuff. So we had that visual language all the way through. But the movement, I think, I mean, it's been great. I think Wolfwalkers is really showing the heights that we've gotten to with the crew. We've some young people that we never worked with before, but we also have people that worked with us since Secret of Kells or Song of the Sea. Like Sven Rothman was our supervisor, and we were working with our teams in Luxembourg and France, and a lot of old friends. And I really feel like where we used to have to be very stylized in the movement, more for budget reasons than anything else, now we can choose. So we were able to like have the soldiers and the Lord Protector almost move like clockwork or robots, in comparison to the wolves and Maeve. And even Robin changes, like from being quite rigid in her how she kind of behaves at the start to becoming much more flowy towards the end. So like that's something that we designed in, and I'm so happy we were able to do it. I think the studio has really evolved in the ambition that we can put into the movement, which is not just designing the characters, it's actually designing how they move. So, it's old stuff that we've played around with in previous movies, brought hopefully to a new level.
Yeah, we would have played around with those kind of things earlier just for visual gimmicks, really, or like because we would try it out. Whereas I think with Wolfwalkers, it was much more determined to fit in with the visual language of the film. And that there was a specific story reason for doing so, like that the forest was built all around curves and flowing lines and energetic sketchiness, and the characters too, because it had to suggest this life and this energy within that the wildness has, that Robin needs. And then everything with the town is very rigid and geometric and very stuck and mechanical, because it's too controlled by rules and it's oppressive, and so like Maeve and the wolves would move so fluidly, and they would have smears and they would have, multiples, whereas the townspeople would be very like pose to pose and very like blocky and
even
rigid
on trees and stuff. Like Sven was great at finding ways to really emphasize that with, I mean, it's an animation festival, so forgive a bit of jargon, but yeah, smears and multiples is more, you can see it there. In this scene, I always like to show this scene because there's such a difference in just how the characters are animated. I mean, it also goes to how they're drawn too, but when the characters are rough and scratchy, like Robin there, she can move much more fluidly. But when the characters are more town people, they've got a hard line on them like that. So it was very thoughtful, and every department were really kind of bringing that to the storytelling, which was lovely as well.
Yeah, and then when it goes into color, you can see like even the ink and paint department had to make so many creative choices to offset the colors outside the line so that it seems more like the woodcut block printing. And then they would also leave the color blocks behind to create their own smears. So even if the animators didn't put smears in, that they might have, that the ink and paint might decide to have smears there just with the color blocks, just to emphasize the movement.
Just in case anybody watching doesn't know, I'm trying to find a smear to show what a smear is, and then multiple. But like a multiple is when you see all the hands, like when the bird is flying and you see all the wings at the same time on screen, it creates a kind of very graphic blur effect. And see when the two boys here, here's a good bit here when Maeve is swapping their hats. You'll see that, it's so fast you barely see it, but it's I think I caught it the other day that there's a frame where they're fighting, and yeah, there's multiple hands. Do you see that? When they're fighting, they have several hands. That's a smear or a multiple, That's actually a mix of a smear and a multiple. But this is old Warner Brothers style tricks from the Bugs Bunny days that you don't see as much of. Now, what's interesting is they're bringing it back. What I saw when I saw Into the Spider-Verse, they did this, but with a CG film. But for a long time, it seemed like all CG wanted was to look as much like live action, and I felt it was nice that we could use in the movement a lot of old cartoon tricks more and be more cartoony. I mean, the animators were happy as well because Breadwinner was such a subtle story. It required very subtle, controlled movement and very respectful movement. But at least with this, they kind of felt they could kind of let loose a bit and do all that really squashy, stretchy, cartoony animation that, you know, every animator enjoys doing it because it's just so much fun to watch.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful. Look, every frame is a work of art. You could print it all off and mount each one of them. You know, I mean, it's really beautiful. And there's so many details you could talk about. Like coming to mind, there was the magpie in the water at one stage washing, and I just thought it was beautiful. Whoever did that little sequence.
But
know,
also,
just...
Ross, talk about why you wanted magpies in there.
Huh?
Oh, magpies supposedly came to Ireland with the Cromwellian invasion, so that's why magpies have such bad luck in Irish society, because they supposedly flew up and landed in Wexford and made their way up through Ireland around the same time as Cromwell came in. But then, you know, if you go into English folklore, magpies have this superstitious kind of quality to them too. But the blackbird is the one washing in the water, and the blackbird is very kind of iconic of Ireland. And then the magpies come in and scare it away, so it's kind of like a symbol of like the Cromwell's scaring off the older Irish beliefs.
Very good. I didn't know that. If I could change the subject slightly, I mean, you've obviously made a decision to have comedy in the film. I think there's some really, like, you know, I laughed a lot in the film, and that was lovely. Because again, from a programmer's point of view, you know, you often watch, you know, some serious stuff. So when people write and make funny stuff, it's just great to see it. And I'll give you a couple of examples that I really laughed at. Like, I grew up in a village, so we would say things like, "Come here, you townie." I just thought that was brilliant, the whole townie thing. And I thought it was excellent. I think Nora Toomey played the head
housekeeper,
cook or housekeeper, yeah. And when she says to Robin, she says, "Work is prayer, girl. Make sure you don't stop." And then she comes home to Dad and she says, "I prayed the whole Bible." I just thought that was so Irish to me.
But you know what? Will has worked on two very poignant films now with us, and he's naturally a very funny guy. You know, he brought a lot of that humor into the dialogue. And then Ross and myself did want it to be a bit of crack because so many versions of it were just getting
so dark and so serious. Yeah. And I think it needed the humor too, because like if you follow Robin's story, so like she's under attack and she's been told what to do, and everything is connected with the Lord Protector is so kind of brutal and oppressive, and then most of the third act is very, very dark and very tense and everything. So really tried to get in as much lightness where we could. Anytime with Robin and Maeve, I think Maeve brings that lightness as well. When we tried to have as much fun with the girls.
Props to young Eva Whittaker. Like, we knew Tommy Tiernan would be hilarious, but we were so lucky to find a little 8 or 9 year old girl who could be so funny. You know, she's such a talent, and I'm so happy to see her because Honor is really, really talented as well, and she's had a lot of experience. But this was Eva's first experience, and to find a little Irish girl who was just perfect for the part. And she really brought Maeve to life, and it's lovely. She got nominated there for an Annie, and she's been recognized, so I'm really happy about that.
No, she's terrific. She's just such good fun. And I want to talk about sound, if I get things run away with us. Bruno Cooley, you worked with him with Song of the Sea. Keela again, and it is Keela obviously animated at the beginning, I guess.
Yeah, there they are. Some of them, not all of them. Keela is quite the moving feast, the amount of members, but we kind of drew the ones that we've worked with most consistently, which is the O'Shnuddics and Brian and Dee. It was natural to continue working with them. Again, before Song of the Sea, we worked with them on Secret of Kells, and while we were developing Wolfwalkers, they were actually working together again on a film called White Fang. I think they did the score for another animated film called Ballerina, if that's what it was finally released as, I'm not sure. And so they've worked together since we kind of first brought them together over the last 20 years. So it feels very natural to work with them again. And they're really, really nice mixture. This is actually Bruno recording in Song of the Sea there with the shell up to his ear. So it's an older photo.
It did make sense as well for if Wolfwalkers was to be the third film of the triptych that, you know, that the same sound and same score would be used. And one of the beautiful things that we found throughout the recording then is that Bruno and Keela working together was very similar to the visual language of like something very structured and ordered, and then something very chaotic and wild and instinctive. I mean, Keela's way of approaching music is very much like jamming and just feeling the music and just going with it. And like I think Brian himself joked that like the only way to shut them up would be to put sheet music in front of them, because very few of them can read it. Whereas Bruno is all about like the, you know, the composition, and he'll have like the entire orchestra, you know, laid out like almost regimentally in his mind. You know, it's really fascinating to watch that he has the entire orchestra like playing, and all the strings and brass section and like lead violin and lead cello and everything all playing around in his head. So it's a real gift. But like that, he would write out the entire score very structured. So it's really, they're really in opposition to each other, but then they come together to make this absolutely amazing like music at the end.
The other thing about Bruno is right from the start, he has always used, you know, voices as part of his music. And like, it was really important in Song of the Sea, the way he used Lisa Hannigan, because he found a way to help us not show the flashbacks of the mum all the time by bringing her voice through the movie. So it was like a reminder. And we were really lucky because we had his daughter, who was only a baby whenever we made Secret of Kells, sings in the soundtrack. But also we have Aurora, and Aurora Aknes is from Norway, and we stumbled across her song Running with the Wolves, and it really fit so well that we asked her, and thankfully she agreed to slightly rearrange it and change the words. And Bruno wrote a piece for the orchestra, and then Keela came in and layered on some of their kind of folk or trad sound onto it, and percussion and stuff. And it was really nice because it became like a tent pole of the movie, and kind of like Lisa's song in Song of the Sea. It kind of became the, you know, the song that you associate with the whole movie after that point, but it comes right in the middle of the movie rather than at the end. So it kind of shows us a high point for the, like, it's like Aurora is Robin's inner voice, you know, because she sounds quite young, even though she's in her 20s. So it's kind of like we've been inside Robin's head, and it's that kind of empathy thing. She's seen the world as a wolf. She can't go back to the way she wanted to be before, where she wanted to hunt them. So it was really important as well. So that was really happy that the guys were, and that's the lovely thing about them. They're so into collaboration, and they're so open to collaboration. And we were a bit afraid they wouldn't like the song or the idea of working with more of a kind of a pop artist, but they were totally open to, you know, making it work and finding a way. And I do think they found a way that the song kind of integrates into the rest of their music, so that it doesn't seem like just a little clip in the center, like a music video. So,
I think you're extremely lucky. I mean, it's a very accomplished song, but in the way everyone collaborates with you, and that you have those built associations with musicians. I mean, it's a blessing really to have such a perfect fit, because it's often such a difficulty to make happen, do correctly the music. But you seem to have formed great relationships in that regard, you know.
Definitely. And I think we're so lucky as well in that, like, it makes us look good that we have so many talented people that we go back to again and again. And it's always a subtle alchemy, because, you know, even if you work with the same people aren't the same twice. So the way that we've evolved with our collaborators has been really lovely as well, because, you know, the first time we worked with Bruno and Keela, we all didn't really know each other, but by now we all know each other so well that there's a huge amount of trust, and it's much nicer.
And you guys, you're both credited for Molly's song, is that right? Did you write that song?
Oh, just writing the lyrics. I mean, they're like, we kind of, Will, Tom, myself had written in this kind of like song that the bullies would be, you know, singing in the town to kind of like, you know, tease Robin with, and it was like a modern version of an older song that would have been written about the wolves, you know, like, so the townspeople are singing wolf, wolf, kill the wolf, whereas the older Irish version is like wolf, wolf, howls the wolf. And so all we did really was just expand on the lyrics. And I think when I was writing the lyrics, I play like bouzouki and mandolin and stuff, so I was just coming up with a little tune. And I think I played that for Colin as he was coming up with the entire piece, and then he kind of riffed on that, and then Maria Doyle Kennedy heard that and then riffed on that. So it was like a continuous evolution the whole way through. So I think Tomm and myself are only credited just for the fact that we wrote some lyrics. That's all.
I've been lucky like that. I've gotten credits for songs where my input was mostly just the lyrics. So it's the same with Aisling's song and the Song of the Sea song as well.
That's cool. That's nice to have a song, you know, you're associated with. And look, finally on the sound, obviously it was a huge important part of the whole film. And there's the how humans hear, I guess, and how animals hear, and specifically, you know, when Robin begins to hear as a wolf. And I thought that might have been fun research, or how did you, there must have been a lot of conversations around how these different beings actually hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember like we were always so, I suppose we wanted to trust that the sound designers would do it justice, you know, and they really did. And they have this amazing library of like all kinds of you know, animal noises, and I think they had recorded a lot for White Fang, the movie that they worked on before. Was it White Fang that they worked on?
Yeah,
yeah. So they'd recorded a lot of wolf noises for that, but the thing that I think was the challenge when the guys in Peace Rouge were doing it is that they had to expand beyond just the species. So that's why, you know, to some people's annoyance, the wolves bark when in fact wolves don't bark. So they had to use like, you know, sounds of dogs.
What person is complaining about wolves barking but not wolves talking? I mean, wolves don't talk either. Come on. But what was you mentioned earlier about recording the sound in Dingle for Song of the Sea, and so again, just as much as with all the departments, it was lovely that Peace Rouge again, Secret of Kells, Song of the Sea, working again with Felix, who was the guy with the aquaphone at the Dingle Animation Festival, going out and recording the underwater of the boat and going out to see fungi, God rest him, and recording all of that. And so I wouldn't be surprised if some of Felix's library from those days made its way into Wolfwalkers again. Unfortunately, everyone was working under lockdown, so there was no field trips to record the sound, but the guys were, they're just experts. And Sebastian and Fabian similarly worked on Secret of Kells, and we had the same. So we were building a library. I think some of Coo's barks might have made its way from Song of the Sea, might have made its way into Maeve as well, you know.
Wow.
But yeah.
Listen, I think, you know, we've pretty much come to the end. Oh, you wanted to show that sequence actually, Tom. That's like
I just wondered.
lapse.
Yeah, I wondered if we just wanted to chat about a little bit, because we're talking about the sounds. The other thing that we tried to represent visually, not just sounds, but also the scent and the smell. And so this was probably the most innovative part of Wolfwalkers for us, that we'd never done anything like this before, where we built up the wolf vision or the wolf hearing scenes, where we wanted to show from the wolf's point of view how the world would appear. And so we have scents on screen, we have sounds on screen, we're moving the camera in a 3-dimensional way, and yet it's all rendered on pencil and paper at the end. So just anyway, I thought I might as well show it.
I know, that's really cool. It's excellent. Yeah, really
important to mention Evan's name as well. Evan McNamara of Paper Panther, and Paper Panther obviously in Dingle, was it last year or the year before? It must have been the year before. Yeah,
they won. Yeah, with Black Dog.
Brilliant on Gower Dove. Yeah, it's great.
Amazing. Yeah, so brilliant. And actually, because of that, Padraig Fagan, he was one of our selectors this year. You know, it's something I started this year, like whoever wins each year, I'll invite them to be a selector the following year, especially for the students. You know, whoever wins the best Irish student and best international student, you know, bring them in and get their opinion, because like you said at the start, we're getting a bit old, you know, we need the young people's perspective always. I'm fortunate, I've got a lot of, you know, young sons in their 20s, and they've been very helpful with all this new technology. And, you know, we're doing stuff on Discord with young people, and, you know, I wouldn't have been able to work it all out without them, you know. Okay. But look, before I let you go, I mean, maybe if you want to mention anything that's coming up. I know, Tom, I follow you on Instagram and I see all those wonderful drawings, and, you know, your skeleton is behind
Cuddles. Cuddles. He just arrived today, or they just arrived today. I'm not sure. I don't know enough anatomy yet to be able to decide which sex he is. But yeah, I mean, I'm studying life drawing. I was supposed to be in Paris doing it, and I'm still hoping to go and do it in Paris with the Centre Culturel Irlandais. But in the meantime, I'm just doing it online and hopefully helping out with some of the other projects. I do like a creative cafe every Monday where I talk to the staff in the studio who are all working from home, and I try and have a different group every week and just try and keep the cross-pollination that would have happened in the pub or in the studio when people were hanging out together, eating lunch together. So that's been mainly my focus because the studio is so busy. And it's the first time I haven't been in 20 years kind of directing anything or preparing anything in particular, so it's a nice moment for me.
Nice. Yeah. What about yourself, Ross?
I'm back to painting. Yeah, I mean, my studio was covered with cobwebs and dust after Wolfwalkers. So yeah, like I'm slowly getting back into it. It's very hard this time to go from one medium into another. Normally I would have been like chopping it up a little bit more, like a week here and a week there. But yeah, with Wolfwalkers taking up so much time, especially in production, there was no time to paint. So it's getting back. It's getting back slowly. Yeah.
Riding a bike, Ross, you'd be grand.
Yeah.
Riding the bike. I can imagine it's like after making a film like that, it's like you're back to sleeping properly. You know, there's nothing waking you up at night.
I don't know who I am anymore because we're in lockdown, so life is pretty simple. The only people I see are my wife and my granddaughter, and yeah, it's remarkable because every other film, as I said, the next one started kind of as one was finishing. And so, yeah, it's a different place to be in. And I thought I'd be away and traveling and doing all sorts of exciting things. But as we were saying earlier on, like, it's amazing how much can be done by Zoom. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm really aching to be in Paris and working with a real model and just being in Paris. But doing life drawing over Zoom and learning anatomy and helping the other crew, it's not as bad as I might have imagined last year. You know?
No. I might have preferred to have been in Dick Max.
Would have preferred to be in Dick Max.
Yeah.
A real
I
pint.
haven't had a pint since the summer. I haven't had a proper good pint since the summer. Mind you, Apple sent us some really nice whiskey there. I'm looking forward to opening that. So that's something.
Close your eyes and imagine you're in Dick Max when you take the first sip.
Yes. Well, I'll officially say thank you very much. You're an inspiration, the two of you, and it's a joy to absolutely look at your work.
Thank you, Maurice, and
Thanks,
everyone
Maurice.
involved in Dingle, because it's such a lovely thing in the calendar. It's so important for Irish animation, and hopefully we can all get back together and hang out. It's one of my favorite events, so hopefully we can do it soon.
Yeah,
this time next year. Yeah.
All right. Thank you all very much. Thank you.